Good evening, AP Euro, and we are live for the night before Euro live hangout. And, this is kind of a first because I've always had to do a push the night before the exam. And now that they've split up a push and Euro, now I can do a night before review and, of course, a morning of review. So, great stuff there. And we've got some people joining us already. And whoa, we went from like 188 to 948 in about 2 seconds. Okay.
Wow.
Oh, 1300. I'll take 1300. Okay. Well, thank you everybody for coming. And we're going to be taking questions via Twitter. If you will hashtag night before Euro and tag, me and or Paul Sargent at Tom Ritchie and at P Sargent, we are going to be taking questions. Now, remember, we're not necessarily going to be taking, every question we get. We're going to be kind of looking through things and seeing what people are asking, all of that kind of stuff. We might give you some advice on, asking the right questions and stuff like that. Now, I am joined tonight with my friend Paul Sargent. Paul, let's introduce yourself.
Hey everybody, I'm Paul Sargent, and it is the night before the big exam. This is the moment you guys have been preparing for months. I mean, since you've walked into the class for the very first time back in the fall, maybe late summer, you've been thinking about and working towards this night, or I guess tomorrow actually. And tonight is like one last moment to kind of just put the icing on the cake, solidify the things that you still need to know, and kind of bring it home so that tomorrow you're totally ready. And that's what we're here for, to help you out.
All right, and ladies and gentlemen, this will be a 2-hour broadcast. So Paul and I will be taking questions for 2 hours. Now, what I'm doing after this is over is I'm going to do a little salon review. Now, this is a small group review. It is almost sold out. Now, by the time I finish talking about this, it's probably be sold out. There are like 2 spots left. Okay, so the AP Euro salon review. And the objective here was, these Catherine subscribers. I've got a Catherine level subscription, a Diderot level ticket. Remember, Catherine, she's an empress, and Diderot is always broke. And so as far as that goes, the Catherine level subscribers, they're going to be able to actually get on camera and chat with me and all that kind of stuff and ask questions. They're really going to be driving this review. Okay, so the review is basically, as far as people determining what I'm going to do, it's customized. This is largely Paul and I doing what we do. So these folks will be the ones that will be, setting the tone for this late night review. It'll last at least 90 minutes, but the 8-push one lasted longer than that last week. Now, if somebody just wants to watch, this is just a general admission ticket, $5 to get into that after hours small group session. But my objective here was to work with a small group. Last week I had 58 push students paying $10. They told me that they would have rather there be less students and have paid a little more money. So I'm actually going to have, only 30 people that have access on this, and that's going to be it. Okay, so this is a small group session. Like I said, almost sold out, for that. But you can get as many $5 tickets. Like we can, you could have, all 2,000 of you watching that. Not that you have to, but, you can do that. So I will be doing some after-hour stuff with a small group. Also, ladies and gentlemen, if you have not gotten hold of my Romulus AP European History Review app, please consider that. It's available at the App Store and Google Play. There is a free version that is available, so you can try it out if you want to decide if it's worth $2.99. Good last-minute study tool, just a nice little trivia app for your phone, nothing too fancy. It's just a little $2.99 app. So as far as that is concerned, ladies and gentlemen, also Romulus is going to be tweeting some free promo codes. So at Romulus edu. Okay, if you go to @romulus.edu, you might want to put that on notifications or something like that. They're going to be tweeting, that account is going to be tweeting some promo codes. My partner's there, he's going to be tweeting promo codes at various points. Now, also, they've been that account has been putting out some different things here. Okay, so auto dicks were classified as. Okay, let's see what y'all think about that. I'm going to go ahead and retweet that. Y'all go ahead and get on that poll. Okay, now I'm going to be taking questions again at Tom Ritchie or at P Sargent, and we are going to be taking those hashtag, ladies and gentlemen, night before Euro. Okay, so we've got John here. We've got some stuff here. All right, John, following. Now, remember, ladies and gentlemen, followers will get first priority, and especially if there are people who've been supporting my work for a long time. Okay, so enough of the pleasantries and introductions. Thank you, everybody, for coming over tonight, and we are going to be doing this till nearly 10 o'clock. Quick shout out to to the Goot Nation or the Gut Nation, okay, because this is, remember, a written test. Okay, they got me this mug when I was in Virginia Beach, and it's awesome. No time for Stalin. We're aiming for high marks. Man, I tell you what, the Goot Nation in Virginia Beach cracks me up. And if y'all hadn't seen that Salt Richie t-shirt on Instagram, like, oh my goodness, thank you, whatever class that is that made that. So let's go ahead and see what we've got. So let me go ahead and do this. Now we are going to be focusing on post 1815 tonight. Okay, now tomorrow, all questions, I'll be doing breakfast with Richie at 9 a.m. And so that's going to be no holds barred. I'll take questions about anything. But tonight, priority questions will go to post 1815, because on Monday we had pre-1815 was the emphasis. Okay, and so which Corinne, we are going to look into. I think having a women overview might be a nice thing. Also a bit about the Russian Revolution. I've gotten a lot of questions about the Russian Revolution. Paul, is there anything you want to go ahead and get started with that one?
Well, I think we're talking about the Russian Revolution. What you need to understand is sort of its significance in terms of European history. It has so many wonderful stories to it. And like everything else that we're going to try and do tonight, it's got backstories and details that make it wonderfully interesting. But sometimes it's easy to get bogged down in those details. Now, the Russian Revolution largely arises out of, well, widespread discontent with what was going on at the time. We're in 1917. Russia's fighting in World War I. Nicholas is not, the Tsar of Russia is not doing a very good job of sort of handling the war. He's actually gone to the front to be with the troops himself, and basically left Moscow in the hands of Rasputin. And the army is vastly undersupplied and undermanned. People don't have enough food, and well, seeing all of this stuff happening, there's a lot of tension in the air. So in February of 1917, a revolution breaks out, and largely, like most revolutions, it starts because of food shortages. And it's a largely bloodless revolution that ends up with a provisional government, which is going to try and sort of figure out what's going on. We'll say that for now. But they do one thing which is extremely unpopular with the people, and that's to continue to keep the war going, to continue fighting against the German army. And the Germans, seeing that the Russians are completely discontent with what's going on, they grab this little revolutionary Russian who's been in exile named Lenin, and they put him on a train and they transport him across Germany and like insert the virus, as I like to say, right into the Russian system. And Lenin shows up, starts talking about communism, worker revolutions, and more importantly to the people, he really promises two things. Number one, an end to the war, and number two, food. And when people hear those things, they kind of get behind him. And so there's a second revolution, which is the communist revolution, that overthrows the provisional government and creates a communist Russian state under Lenin and his group, the Bolsheviks. Now, this really is going to cost Russia a whole lot, because Russia, in order to meet these promises, Lenin is going to have to figure something out to get Russia out of the war. And so he signs this treaty called the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk with the Germans to get out of the war. And in turn for doing that, they give away vast amounts of Russian territory, so that and Germany kind of takes it. But it allows Lenin and the Bolsheviks which to me sounds like some 70s punk band, but Lenin and the Bolsheviks are able to kind of focus on consolidating their power, because they've got a lot of people in the country who are against them. It ends up in a 4-year civil war for Russia that eventually the Bolsheviks will win, and they'll form the USSR, the Soviet Union, which will be incredibly important in the history of the 20th century because it becomes sort of the counterforce during the Cold War. So the Russian Revolution is important in that it shows the power of popular discontent in the face of severe shortages caused by war, but it also sets the precedent for a real communist state, or at least something close to a Marxist communist state in Europe, which is going to challenge democracy and challenge capitalism for, well, at that point, another 70 years.
All right. Excellent. Excellent. And so let's see what we've got here. We have got, let's see. If somebody, let's see, so conservatism and liberalism, okay? So as far as conservatism and liberalism, ladies and gentlemen, we're talking about classical conservatism, classical liberalism. Now, one of the biggest challenges for students is to, you know, I've got on my Star Wars shirt, you know, when Yoda says, you know, that you must unlearn, okay? You must unlearn something. That part of it is unlearning American ideas of liberalism, because remember, economic liberalism, when you go to Europe, you know, is still, you know, the same thing, you know, very similar at least as classical liberalism. Remember, liberalism in a European context, when it comes to the economy, it means a free market economy with as little government intervention as possible. So really leaning toward the laissez-faire. And that's when you look at 19th century classical liberalism. Not only did it have this social liberalism that people should be free to do whatever it is that they choose, because this is rooted in the individual. Liberalism comes from liberty. And so the individual should be able to do whatever they choose. They should have economic freedom. They should have personal freedom. Liberals did not trust government and still don't trust government to provide a great many services. And so when we think about conservatism, though, now think about this. The French Revolution was driven by two big ideas, okay? Liberalism and nationalism. And conservatism is really trying to shut down the influence of the French Revolution and really these ideas that are blamed for all of the chaos. The conservatives said, hey, these liberals, they wanted to come in here and they wanted to get everybody excited and all of this kind of stuff. You know, they want people to get excited, you know, about their nation, about liberty, and it undermined the old social order. So remember, conservatism, you know, in the 19th century sense, is about trying to maintain as much of the old regime as possible. Now, of course, the French Revolution has happened. So, you know, it's not, I mean, outside of Russia, nobody's going to be able to pretend that, you know, we're still in the, you know, the 16th, 17th century or something like that. But, you know, 18th century. But, you know, it's going to be a little, you know, the conservatives, they want to hold on to as much of that as they can. And that is the objective there. So liberalism, conservatism, of course, I've got the video on isms. Paul has one as well, you know, that you've got all of these different 19th century isms. So classical liberalism, classical conservatism, then, of course, nationalism, that is saying let's bind people together based on national bonds, bonds of nationality, which, remember, the most important thing there is language, okay? That someone's language is the primary determinant of, you know, whether there should be a nation. So the earliest Italian and German unification movements, these are based on getting people who have the same language together. Now, you could also go into religion as well. That certainly doesn't hurt, even though the Germans, you know, you've got Protestants in the north, Catholics in the south, you know, still worked okay. You know, you've got pretty much Catholicism in Italy. Now, of course, the Greek independence movement was rooted in both liberalism and nationalism, with a bit of romanticism kind of sprinkled in for good measure. Paul, anything else on the isms?
No, I think you covered the basic there. The romanticism part, though, I think is important to highlight with the early to mid part of the 19th century, in that the idea behind these movements was to kind of bring people together. And to create governments which would be responsive to the people. This is kind of the French Revolution mixed with Enlightenment ideals, trying to push out sort of the old world, old tradition, based on birth kind of systems which had been ruling Europe. But the the Romantic ideals were that these feelings would create a drive in the peoples of Europe that would cause them to rise up and really take to the streets, throw up the barricades, you know, do a whole liberty leading the people thing on all their governments, and that would be how social reform and political reform would happen. And ultimately, we found out that I say we, I wasn't actually there at the time, but you know, maybe, you know, no, I wasn't there. But we found out that like that wasn't going to be successful. That these revolts would happen, and there definitely was an emotional appeal to them, but it didn't have a lasting ability to be able to create something real. And let's face it, the armed forces of the monarchs proved to be too much for them. And so they would have to wait for a realist approach, a realpolitik approach like Cavour and Bismarck found, in order to be more successful in creating these reforms. So typically I think of it like this. We have conservatism kind of sitting on one side saying boundaries are boundaries, kings are kings, the old world is the old world. And then you have these other ideas of nationalism, liberalism, and romanticism, which are kind of intertwining, working together in order to try and uproot the old social system. But as I said, ultimately they're unsuccessful at that.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, I just retweeted a tweet from Romulus EDU giving out 3 free promo codes for the Romulus Euro app. Now, of course, the app's like, you know, $2.99. It's not like somebody won the lottery. But if you're following that account and you've got notifications on there, you know, that account's going to be retweeting. It's going to be tweeting some more promo codes. Remember, a promo code can only be used once. Okay, so, but there are 3 promo codes. Have at them. All right, and Destiny, this is something that comes up quite a bit, the Enlightenment versus Romanticism. And I think that that is something that, you know, we've seen that on lots of essay topics and that sort of thing. Now, remember that the Enlightenment is all about, you know, progress, okay? Which, of course, the Enlightenment, it's like if we're making technological progress, it's a very old school definition of progress. It's like if we have more technology, okay, if we have more technology and all of that, then we're good. If we have more science, we're good. Basically, the Enlightenment was rooted in the idea of human perfectibility, you know, based on, you know, science and technology, and all of that, you know, basically a whole rational system. And so, you know, meanwhile, the Romantics really offer a critique of progress, because a lot of times we think, you know, it's like, you know, I've got, you know, an iPhone 7, you've got a flip phone. The Enlightenment guy would say, I'm better than you. Okay. Like I've got a better phone than you. After all, I can't put Romulus Euro on a flip phone. Right. And so as far as that goes, you know, a romantic would be like, well, you know what? You're distracted a lot more than I am. And, you know, I actually have an attention span because I'm not on my phone all the time. And, you know, my posture is better and all of this stuff. Like a romantic is really about getting away from like technology, getting away from all of this science, and, you know, thinking about, you know, what's really important in life is beauty. All right. And there's something to be said for that, you know, that a lot of times, I mean, I think certainly like Paul and I have been hustling for, you know, we've got multiple APs that we teach and all of that stuff. And, you know, really like, man, I mean, I've been missing out on some things. You know, I think this weekend going to go for a hike with my child. Now, of course, childhood is another thing. Like the Romantics, you know, they're thinking that we want to glorify childhood. I actually recommended the book The Little Prince to someone not too long ago. Love that book. And that certainly has some kind of, you know, romantic undertones, that like, what is to say that the adult way of thinking is inherently superior to a child's way of thinking. So childhood should be cherished. Religion should be cherished, especially like a religion like Catholicism experiences a revival during this time. Whereas remember that Catholicism for the Enlightenment represents this church hierarchy, curse the infamy, as far as Voltaire is concerned, that, this is something that is, it's bad. And so really now, of course, the Enlightenment, what you need to remember is that the Enlightenment really continues into the 19th century. The classical liberals take up that Enlightenment torch and they keep running with it. Whereas the Romantics have, some things to say about the liberal worldview, because remember, the culmination of the liberal worldview is the Industrial Revolution, of the Enlightenment, that we've got this technology, we've got all this stuff, and we're making more things, we're more prosperous, but at what cost? Okay, so that's really when you come to the Romantics, the Enlightenment is man over nature. The Romantics, nature over man, okay, which J.M.W. Turner's The Slave Ship is one of my favorite romantic paintings, where you see basically this shipwrecked slave ship, and it is just, you've got everything just all over the place. It's basically nature has gotten its revenge on human sinfulness and, all of this kind of stuff and exploitation, that ultimately nature will have its revenge. All right. So as far as that goes, now, Paul?
Let me just hop in for a second and say, as the Romantics would say, first of all, that's what I like about you, is that you're able to go through and, explain these things. But I just retweeted, someone made a picture of Lenin and the Bolsheviks and tweeted it out there. And I like the fact that we're getting some humor in here from the people out in the Twitterverse, I guess.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so good. Yeah, definitely send us some stuff here. And we like humor, we like memes. Of course, AP Euro memes should be tweeting some stuff. AP Euro memes, DM me a tweet that you want me to retweet, and I will tweet it. We definitely want to get some memes going, ladies and gentlemen. It's the night before the exam, and what is review without memes? All right, so I've got something here from Whitney. All right, a great follower. Looks like she caught a fish. Can we go over the unification of Germany? Now, the thing is, I tell you, people who watched my German unification 3-part lecture did really well last year on the DBQ, because they got a good refresher on that. So remember that Paul and I are giving very succinct explanations, but you've got a treasure trove of videos that we both made about things. Now, what I would recommend is, I've got a lecture on German unification. I don't have one on Italian unification, but Paul has a lecture on Italian unification that is great. I recommend it to people all the time. Now, as far as German unification, of course, this process starts at the as far as in the early part of the 19th century. I was actually looking at the multiple choice from last year, and you had basically a reference, like a picture. It wasn't by name, but the Burschenschaft, the student groups in the German states that, were, rallying for liberal nationalism. Okay. Like basically, the students did not support Metternich's conservative order that was established by the Congress of Vienna, which if you hadn't heard my Metternich rap, take a look at that. Okay. But as far as that goes, the Congress of Vienna. And so that, that is something, as far as, as far as we're concerned there, these student groups promoting liberalism and nationalism. And what you saw was, before 1848, let's try to unite Germany on the basis of liberalism. The Frankfurt Parliament, which was a failure, met in 1848. And so that wasn't going to work. And then enter Bismarck. Okay, now Bismarck, I've got basically a 2-part thing on Bismarck. That first of all, Bismarck was into realpolitik. That even though he was at heart a conservative, he would rely on liberalism. He would rely on, conservatism or nationalism or even socialism if he needed to. In some ways, you could see him as a practitioner of appeasement, except the type of appeasement that worked. Like basically, the liberals didn't like his, repression, except repression the socialists they were okay with. But it's like the liberals didn't like some of his stuff, but then Bismarck was like, hey, how about I take on the Catholic Church and what's known as the Kulturkampf? That basically the Catholic parties, like at this time, the Catholic Church had still not, Oh goodness, they just like the Goot Nation. I just realized that they didn't like put this in a kiln. Like basically this marker is like rubbing off all over my hands. But it was a nice thought, everybody. It was a nice thought. But anyway, see like my hand there. Okay.
I guess they were rushing to get it ready for you.
Exactly. So as far as that goes, Bismarck is like, look, liberals, the Catholic parties have still not, reconciled themselves with secularism, and they're trying to influence the government. So how about it take them on? The liberals were like, yeah, we would like a more secular state. Bismarck's like, hey, I can promote industrialization. You like that, liberals? The liberals are like, yeah. Now, of course, today, when people say they are liberal in America, a lot of times they're, into like the environment and stuff like that. But remember, a 19th century liberal, they're all about enterprise and industry. So Bismarck shared some goals with the liberals. And then he's like, with the socialists, it's like good cop, bad cop. He bans the Social Democratic Party and censors their materials. And then at the same time, he implements what they call state socialism. Okay, state socialism, which is this basically like, look, I'm going to give government old age pensions. I'm going to give government health insurance and government accident insurance. And so these are things that the socialists have been clamoring for. And Bismarck's like, look, we'll put this into practice in our conservative authoritarian state. Now, of course, the liberals weren't happy with this. A lot of conservatives weren't happy with this, but it did shut down the socialist agitation, because generally when people feel safe, they are gravitating less toward radical and socialist movements. And so Bismarck is going all over the place politically. And then, of course, there are the wars of German unification, which Bismarck, calls this process blood and iron. Blut and Eisen, which then again, he said iron and blood, but in both German and English, blood and iron sounds better. So people just always call it blood and iron. I guess his speechwriter just wasn't on his game or something like that. And so blood and iron, essentially, that he said that the position of Prussia in Germany. Now, remember, Bismarck's goal is not a nationalist unification of Germany, but a conservative unification of Germany under Prussian dominance. That's why he wants to leave out Austria. And so the Schleswig Wars against Denmark, then the 7 Weeks War, the the Austro-Prussian War, which lasts 7 weeks, where the Prussians just lay the smack down. And then Bismarck then decides we need a national war. We need a truly national war, not Germans versus Germans, but Germans versus France. And so the Franco-Prussian War is the last of the wars of German unification. Then they go to the Hall of Mirrors after they defeat France. They proclaim their empire. And then they, tell France to pay reparations. They're like, hey, this place here, Alsace-Lorraine, a lot of German speakers there. Take that. All right. And so as far as that kind of stuff, ladies and gentlemen, that's what you're looking at with German unification. Now, Paul, if you could kind of address Italian unification and maybe complete with a few comparisons to German unification.
Okay. Well, Italian unification, generally, it starts off with these nationalist romantic movements which are going on. And you have the guy who becomes known as sort of the heart of the Italian unification movement, Mazzini, who tries the romantic approach, and it doesn't work very well. But in the wake of the Crimean War, we have this little state that kind of gains some power up in the northern part of the Italian peninsula. And this is Sardinia Piedmont, or Piedmont Sardinia. You'll see it in lots of different ways. Anyway, the guy who's going to be the architect of Italian unification is very much cut from the same cloth as Bismarck. He's not quite as cunning, I don't think, and cutthroat as Bismarck, but he is very strategic in the way that he does things. And this is Cavour. And Cavour is starts by trying to gain some territory from Austria and makes an alliance with France in order to get some backing here, because he realizes that this tiny state of Piedmont can't hold their own against the Austrian Empire. And so he allies himself with Napoleon III of France, and he starts to curry favor with some other areas of the northern Italian peninsula. Then along comes a guy who wants to unify the southern part of the Italian peninsula using like a red shirt army, right? And he's going to go through, he's going to sort of sweep through southern Italy, surprisingly so. Cavour kind of sends him down and says, like, go ahead and do your thing. And he sweeps through southern Italy and he takes over a lot of it. And when that southern half has been taken over and the northern half has been put together, they come to an agreement that all of this will unify underneath Piedmont, Sardinia. Because really what they need is they need a king, and Piedmont, Sardinia has a king. And that's sort of a very convenient thing. And then they complete the process of Italian unification by taking over the papal states, I mean, the Roman territory, and basically alienating the Pope and the Catholic Church along the way. And so Italian unification and German unification both show this idea of realpolitik, that the ends kind of justify the means. If there's, if you achieve unification in either case, then the way that you achieve it isn't necessarily as important, or maybe it's excusable, I think is a better way to put it. And so they're going to both pull it together, and it's done in a very strategic manner. And that's what kind of characterizes this realist movement. And they're both successful. And so Italy and Germany will, they remain unified. Well, Germany kind of gets split up, I guess, but Italy pretty much remains unified, unless you ask people who live on the edges of Italy. We'll just leave that one alone. It's all part of the EU now anyway. So, what are borders? It's just ask the English. Oh boy. Yeah, we're getting into problems here.
All right, and so as far as that's concerned, now I would say it was Mussolini, right, who made the Concordat with the Catholic Church. Like, basically, the Catholic Church did not reconcile itself with the Italian nation until Mussolini. So now there are two concordats. One of those is Napoleon, of course, and Napoleon, in his Concordat of 1801, invited the Catholic Church back into French public life. Now, this was in terms of as not the official religion or the state religion, but as the majority religion, okay, the majority religion. And so it would have some, like basically ceremonial privileges and preferences, but it wasn't in the sense of state religion. And also there was toleration. And then Napoleon would get to appoint the bishops. Okay, so he would have say in who the bishops were. So basically Napoleon is still showing, and see, that's a lot of it, that people are like, why did people tolerate Napoleon? And Napoleon, in some ways, it's like, well, he was a dictator. Well, the French Revolution wasn't about dictatorship, but the French Revolution was about, putting the church in its place, but still allowing the church to be in public life, but not having an official state church. It was about, Napoleon made advances in the French education system. The Napoleonic Code, for the first time, gave France a single code of laws for the whole country. Louis XIV had aspired to that, but just never got around to it. Never was able to do that and to fully take France out of this old, like, divided feudal state. And so Napoleon is the one who, like, makes France a proper nation. And so in a lot of ways, Napoleon's kind of the completion of the whole enlightened absolutism thing, but then again, of course, Napoleon had a lot of critics as well. And let's see, as far as that goes, let's see, it looks like Bahar's got a question. Good Twitter follower there. Can we review the downfall of communism and the Soviet Union? Okay, so as far as that is concerned, Paul, I wonder if we should just kind of like pass the mic back and forth and maybe kind of go from like late Tsarist Russia to, to Gorbachev, like just kind of a quick sort of thing.
Oh boy. Okay.
So I'll go ahead and start with like late Tsarist Russia. Like,
right.
You think about Russia as far back as Peter the Great. Now, Peter the Great, remember, westernization and warm water ports, W's, okay? And so westernization and warm water ports. And so Peter the Great, is modernizing and westernizing Russia, but Russia remains an autocracy. Catherine the Great was an enlightened absolutist, but it was more style over substance. She gave the philosophes patronage and money and all of that kind of stuff, but there really wasn't a lot of reform. She was always very dependent on the Russian nobility, the boyars who had reasserted themselves since Peter. Peter tried to compromise their power, but Catherine was very dependent on them. But the thing is, you look at Pugachev's rebellion, you know, Catherine let everybody know, look, Russia is still an autocracy. Now, of course, the Decembrist revolt in the 1820s was put down so violently that, you know, I think the last public hanging in, you know, the history of Tsarist Russia, if I'm not mistaken, but put down so violently that in the revolutions of 1848, people still remembered, okay, the Tsarist regime doesn't play around with that kind of stuff. And, you know, so, you know, basically Britain did not have a revolution in 1848 because they were their government was accommodating and somewhat representative, at least a little bit. And then Russia, it was just that government was so backward and autocratic that people knew that if they revolted, then there would be dire consequences. So Russia in the 19th century, still an autocracy. Alexander II, you know, the Tsar in the late, you know, 19th century, tried to liberalize Russia a bit. Okay, so he freed the serfs in 1861. Now that's a little late. Okay, I mean we're talking about serfdom here, and Russia still had it. Okay, and so he frees the serfs. He tries to liberalize some things. He actually had a plan to create a state Duma, and you know, the plan to create a state Duma, before he could do that, he got assassinated by some anarchists who were really like the, you know, the bigger socialist faction at that time, who relied on methods of terrorism to try to undermine the government. And it had its intended effect, because the government abandoned liberalism and went back to repression. And so even at the turn of the 20th century, Russia was still an autocracy with no semblance of any kind of representative government. Now that brings us, Paul, you want to pick up in 1905?
Sure. So there's, if you're starting to see a pattern here, it's probably a good rule of thumb. Now, I'm not going to say that everything is absolutely perfect here, but generally Russian history follows this pattern of repression, followed by attempts to open it up and attempts to you know, sort of loosen the tight grip a little bit, which leads people to do something wrong. You know, the people say something or criticize the ruler or something like that, and then there's this return to kind of clamp back down again, with secret police being sort of like the trademark policy. So in 1905, there's a revolution in Russia that seeks to like really get some concessions from the Tsar. And the Tsar says, hey, you know what, I'll give you these things. I'm going to set up some representative government. I'm going to help you guys out. I'm going to give you some sort of say. And as we talked about earlier on, by 1917, those things hadn't happened. And so you have a real Russian revolution, which overthrows the Tsarist regime, gets rid of the Romanovs, actually physically gets rid of the Romanovs by just machine gunning them all against a wall, and then sets up a communist regime. But what we see throughout the 20th century is that the communist regime kind of follows the same tactics of the old Romanovs. There's still this pattern of repression, followed by then some opening up, which people maybe take advantage of, and then there's more repression that comes after that, and then more opening up and stuff like that. When Lenin comes to power, he realizes that there's not going to be the ability to kind of keep to build a Russian economy that's really strong. And so he starts to allow some limited capitalist enterprise. And these things start to spring up. And when Stalin comes to power, Stalin shuts all this stuff down and says, no, we can't have any of this stuff. We're a communist nation, and we're going to enforce that. We're going to really brutally enforce communism, actually, under Stalin. And there's a series of purges that precede World War II that are, I mean, massively horrible in their scope and in the numbers of people that get murdered by this regime. And Stalin's Russia is really known for sort of the iron grip, and that iron grip extends after World War II to the countries of Eastern Europe. And then when Stalin dies, there's a move to try and modernize Russia a little bit. And Khrushchev is going to come out. And he's going to call for de-Stalinization. He's going to call for kind of moving the country forward, really in an effort to try and compete in the Cold War against the enemy, the United States. And then and so that sort of leads to some more crackdown, especially as you start to see protests, and you start to see things like the Cuban Missile Crisis, which sort of makes Khrushchev look bad. There's a sort of clamping down again, and that kind of lasts. And I'm going to pass it off again till we get to a balding man with a nice little birthmark on his head named Gorbachev. You want to take that?
Right. And one thing that I would note there is, like, now we do see sometimes the Brezhnev Doctrine. The only thing that tends to come up about Brezhnev is this Brezhnev Doctrine. The Brezhnev Doctrine basically says, now, of course, the Truman Doctrine, if you're familiar with U.S. history, that is about containing communism, that we're not going to allow communism to spread into Europe, where it already isn't. And so the Brezhnev Doctrine is kind of like a reverse of the Truman Doctrine. Basically, if you look at, by this time, the Soviets are kind of on the defensive. In the 1950s, the Soviets are like, yeah, Sputnik. All right. And or Da, Sputnik, whatever. But the Russians, they feel like they're ahead. But by the time you get to, the late 60s, the 70s, it's like we've gone to the moon and all that kind of stuff, that the communists are on the defensive. And Brezhnev says the Eastern Bloc. Now, it's important to note that you have the Eastern Bloc countries like Poland, Hungary, Czechoslovakia, which was a country at the time. And so, Romania. All of these countries, they're not part of the Soviet Union, but they're under Soviet influence. They're part of the Warsaw Pact. You got NATO and the Warsaw Pact. And so the Warsaw Pact countries, basically, Brezhnev says that if they try to liberalize, then the Soviet Union is going to send people in. If those countries try to make accommodations to capitalism, then that involves all socialist countries, and we are going to send in military support to maintain the socialist government. So as far as that goes, the Prague Spring in 1968, of course, you've got student protests and stuff throughout Europe and Western Europe and all that. But the Prague Spring, the Czechoslovakian people, they tried to elect a liberalizer. And so Brezhnev was like, oh, no, I know you didn't, okay, and just sends in tanks, sends in troops, and puts that down. Now, Gorbachev, okay, he comes in, and one of the things that Gorbachev does is he renounces the Brezhnev Doctrine. And of course, that's what happens when you look at, when you go into, what happened with West Germany, and then finally, with Poland, and basically like a domino effect, that once the Brezhnev Doctrine is gone, then we see that Eastern Europe starts liberalizing, all of these governments. Of course, it even goes into the Soviet Union. And so Gorbachev, renounced the Brezhnev Doctrine. The other thing he does is he institutes these two reforms, glasnost and perestroika. Now, glasnost means openness. Now, what I think about is glasnost, because I think about glass being open. And so glasnost is openness. All right. And so, basically we're going to be more open. We're going to relax censorship. People can criticize the government. Now, when the government is a mess, then probably not a good idea. It's probably like too much too fast, that it's like, maybe let's clean up the government and then we'll allow people to criticize it and all of that kind of stuff. But, the thing is, like, once you open the floodgates, just runs rampant. People see how messed up everything is. Also, Perestroika Restructuring. All right, which Stroika, structure. Okay, so as far as that goes, the restructuring. Now, the thing is, Gorbachev does these things to try to save communism and what's left of it. He says we're going to need a bit, just like Paul was saying, there are these cycles of like relaxing things and then clamping back down, except Gorbachev's not going to be able to put this genie back in the bottle. That what Gorbachev meant to maintain the Soviet Union and maintain some semblance of socialism actually led to the fall of the Soviet Union. You know, and so, you know, of course, we're still dealing with some of the stuff today as far as Russia's, resurgence and all of that kind of stuff. So I think that we have, put a pretty big answer there. Now, as far as that, Martin, I hear sometimes, JC, I'll get to you, man. I saved your earlier text message because I wanted to make sure I didn't read it and forget about it. So JC, shout out to Chapin High School. All right. And there was a non-follower just asked me for a shout out. Like, really? Okay. So as far as that guy, like, I don't even follow you on Twitter. Shout out to me. Sure. I'll do that. Like, never. All right. So can you explain the main points of Napoleon's Civil Code? One thing that keeps coming up, Martin, is that, the Napoleonic Code is essentially pretty conservative. Okay. That really, especially when it comes to women. Now, during the French Revolution, during the Reign of Terror, there were actually some advances in women's rights, that women for the first time could actually sue for divorce on equal terms as men. And so, before that, it's like a woman couldn't sue for divorce. If a woman had a man's illegitimate child, she wasn't entitled to collect child support. Women had virtually no legal rights. And so during the Reign of Terror, women gained these rights. But now Napoleon, remember with the Concordat, Napoleon is trying to make things to restore, like, some traditional values. In some ways, if any of you are familiar with Roman history, if you want to synthesize this, Augustus Caesar, was a dictator who tried to put, like, basically to bring Rome back into the times like Republican virtue. And so Napoleon's trying to restore traditional families and stuff. So basically, he redoes the divorce code to where, like, a woman can no longer sue for divorce on the same terms as a man. In fact, I think the only time a woman could sue for divorce is if a man brought his mistress into the house. Okay. So basically he was humiliating her, that it's like, infidelity is not enough to constitute valid grounds for divorce. But if he's just outright humiliating you, then that is grounds for divorce. And so that's something that I hear a good bit of on that. Okay, so as far as that's concerned, let's see a few others. Tanner Nelson, thanks for the follow there. All right, Franco-Prussian War, Heart Attack Grill. Watch my video on the wars of German unification. We've already done that, but I've got great stuff there. Okay, so we've got Jonathan. All right, Jonathan loves me so much that doesn't even follow me on Twitter. Mimi, thanks for the follow. Let's see. Elaine, Miss Wicks and her class are watching. Thank you so much, Miss Wicks, for watching. Big, long-time supporters. Thank y'all so much.
Well, and she's been sending out a lot of good tweets. So if you're not following Miss Wicks, you should be, because she's been sending stuff out.
Let me make a note there. Let's see. What's that? Let's see. Elaine Wicks, Elaine Wicks. And she's got a lot of stuff out there that she's putting out there. All right. So ladies and gentlemen, let's see. All right. The College Board and AP Euro students on secrecy. You promised not to tell. Hitler promised not to invade Czechoslovakia, Jeremy. Welcome to the real world. All right, which, that is something that's like the College Board puts out these exams, and they'll give this exam to like 30,000 people. And then they'll be like, you can't tell anybody about it. This exam's a secret. And it's like, you just let 30,000 people see this secret, okay? Which, is some really, like, I don't get it, like how that is secret once 30,000 people have seen it, but who knows? Now that is pretty cool there. Ben, that is a pretty dank meme there. We got a little Newton gift there. Okay, so let's see. Revolutions of 1848, Giselle, remember, I've got a whole video series on that. So the revolutions of 1848, ladies and gentlemen, if you'll watch my first video in that series, it gives you the basics. Then it goes into the revolutions in France, the German states, and Italy. And then it sums up some things about, why not Britain and Russia. But basically, the first part of that lecture is all you need to really, if you're trying to make a 3 especially, take a look at that. All right, so very good. Let's see, you're welcome. All right, besides nationalism, okay, so when we look at the world wars, Paul, maybe you'll little causes of World War I, and perhaps he's asking about World War II as well. So, maybe we can kind of get through, that just to kind of give a little general review of the world wars.
Okay. All right. Well, causes of World War I kind of delve back into the late 19th century. There's these growing forces that are kind of looming over Europe after after the unification of Italy and Germany. Nationalism is starting to change. It's becoming something that's not so much, people should band together based on national identity, but it becomes more about supporting one's nation and being willing to put one's life on the line for one's nation, to revel in the greatness of one's nation over other nations and all of that. And so there's this nationalist kind of competition that's going on. At the same time, there's an increasing military buildup, especially when Germany starts trying to challenge the British naval superiority. I mean, the British have been like the naval superiors of the world for a really darn long time here, And here's a country whose official policy is that their navy will be at least 2 times as large as the next 2 largest navies put together. And so Germany starts to try and challenge this, leading Britain to start building more and bigger ships. And so there's a military buildup. Alongside the naval buildup, there's also a huge improvement in military technology. With the advent of machine guns, with the advent of aircraft, with the advent of all these technologies which are going to make World War I so horrific. And in fact, there are a lot of people leading up to World War I who are starting to believe that not only would a greater war between all of these big countries become would it be a great test of national pride in all of this, but they also kind of think that it's probably better to do it sooner rather than later, because as the military technology hastens and as the buildup continues, the looming war becomes more and more terrible in its destructive capability. So you have militarism, you have nationalism. There's also the alliance system, which was started under Bismarck in an effort to isolate France, who had been completely humiliated by Germany during the unification movement. And then when Bismarck was let go by Kaiser Wilhelm II, the whole thing kind of fell apart and ended up in 2 armed camps. Whenever you hear in history the words 2 armed camps, something's wrong here. And that it's not going to last very long. But you have the Central Powers, Germany, Austria-Hungary, and Italy, who have a defensive alliance. And then you have the Triple Entente powers of Britain, France, and Russia, who are sort of forced together by Germany, who keeps trying to sort of consolidate their position. And then finally, there's imperialism, and all the imperialist holdings in Africa and conflicts in Asia are causing, border conflicts in colonies between different powers colonies cause tensions within the colonizer countries. And so when those 4 things kind of come together, all you need is just like the perfect storm. You need something to happen, and bam, it happens in Sarajevo when the Archduke Franz Ferdinand, the heir to the Austro-Hungarian throne, is assassinated by a Serbian. And Serbia, who are they? There's this sort of very small, relatively insignificant country who just happens to be at the very heart of an ideological conflict between Russia and Austria-Hungary, who are 2 of the main countries in the little double 2 sides facing one another thing. So very quickly, this escalates. Thank you, Germany. Yes, I'm going to go out there and say thank you, Germany, on that one. Escalates very quickly. And before you know it, you've got all of the major powers in Europe involved in a world war. For the start of World War II, we could get really, really deep into this one. Or we could just sum it up and say, yeah, the Treaty of Versailles. that caused it. In fact, I tell my students, and I honestly believe that as we get further and further away from these things, these two wars, historians will kind of pull them together into one. That they'll be called, you know, the Great War of the 20th Century or something. I don't know. Probably come up with a better name than that. But historians also named a war the 100 Years' War. So, you know, maybe they won't come up with a better name. I don't know. But it's really a continuation. It's fought over many of the same issues on many of the same grounds by many of the same countries and at a much higher cost. Yeah, you throw Hitler and Mussolini into the mix to get this thing going, but essentially what happens is that the peace that comes out of World War I is a totally inadequate peace, which does nothing but delay the renewal of this conflict. And so World War II is really sort of an outgrowth of World War I. And what we see when World War II is over is that there's this real effort to try and create something which is going to last a little bit longer. And you know, it comes at the cost of a lot of things, but it becomes sort of a negotiated peace in which Germany, unlike in the Treaty of Versailles, is not really punished severely for World War II. Some people in Germany are, but you know, Germany as a whole is not. And so, yeah, I don't know if that really got to the heart of it all, but I think I hit on some of the main points.
Okay, and I tell you what, Paul, my friend JC, John Coleman Ward from Chapin, South Carolina, whose class hired me a few weeks ago. So it's like basically JC can ask his questions via text message. So you know, JC's got some questions for me. The different French republics. Okay, now of course this is a survey level course, but I think it's good to go through just a little kind of, you know, thing here. Now France is on their 5th republic. I mean, the United States has the oldest functioning written constitution in the world. The French, they have had like several governments. Okay, and so the first one basically you've got here. You know, the first French Republic, which is set up in 1792 during the radicalization of the French Revolution. And of course, that lasts until Napoleon's declaration of the First French Empire in 1804. Now, Napoleon's empire falls. You have the Bourbon Restoration, the restoration of the monarchy. And then, you know, you get into, you know, other stuff there. And then finally, the revolutions of 1848, that sets up the Second French Republic, which is very short-lived because Louis Napoleon is elected president. And then, you know, he's like, you know what? There was this other Napoleon. He was emperor. That was kind of cool. And he's like, look, the Second French Empire. So, you know, he rules then as Napoleon III. And so then after the Second French Empire, you've got, after the Franco-Prussian War, you see the beginning of the Third Republic. And so as far as that's going, you know, you just get some other stuff. And now France is on their 5th republic. Of course, you had Vichy France during World War II and all of that kind of stuff. Okay. But the French, they kind of a hard time like deciding what kind of government to have and all of that kind of stuff. Now, Paul, you've been doing a great job talking about Germany. Would you like to tackle like the, you know, how the fall of communism affected the Eastern Bloc, specifically like with the Berlin Wall, and then Poland and solidarity, like what's going on in the Eastern Bloc there at the time of the fall of communism?
Yeah, I think I like to sort of generalize this because I don't think that the College Board is going to need a whole lot of specifics from you on this. Essentially, what you have is you have the failure of communist states to be able to compete with the West. It's an economic problem, I think, largely, in that a capitalist economy is going to be is simply able to outproduce a communist economy. They're able to produce, especially consumer goods, which increase the productivity of a country. And a communist country, at least in the way that it was practiced in the East, is sort of, it's unable to do that. And so sort of rising tensions, along with the opening of Russian society under Glasnost, is sort of leads to this situation where people feel like they can challenge it. And so we start to see these series of challenges to communist governments all throughout Eastern Europe. And sort of the culminating moment of it is, at least symbolically, is the destruction of the Berlin Wall. This wall, which was put up to separate East and West Berlin, which had been divided after World War II into zones of occupation for, well, the Soviet Union on one side, and then the British, French, and Americans on the other side, who pull, you know, their three sectors into one and just call it, you know, sort of like the Western sector. And so this wall was built, which divided the West from the East, and it had become a symbol of the Cold War. And we all saw on TV these images of students and people coming and doing what had been the unthinkable, a wall which had been fortified and you know, people had died trying to cross, and it had armed guards who would shoot at people. All of a sudden, it's swarmed by protesters who are literally taking sledgehammers to the wall itself and breaking it down physically, like on TV. I can remember watching this thinking, I can't believe I'm actually seeing this happen. And this leads to this series of sort of revolutions all throughout Eastern Europe, which topple communist governments. And they're replaced with sort of burgeoning democracies, you know, and there's this attempt to democratize lots of Eastern Europe. And so what this gives us is, this gives us two things. It gives us, first of all, the end of the Cold War and the end of the communist regime and communist control over the Eastern Europe. But it also broadens eventually the European Union. And the European Union is this attempt, which the sort of belief that grows out of trade negotiations, that says that these European nations, which have been fighting each other for so many centuries, maybe need to come together in the one thing which can really effectively unite countries, which is trade and economy. And those are two things. I said one thing, but you get the idea. And so they form the EU, and that gradually grows to include many of the former Eastern European countries.
All right. So now, as far as that goes, let me go ahead and say a few things. Now, those of you who follow me on Snapchat, Tom Ritchie SC, you might see that I'm putting promo codes for Romulus Euro on my story. Not too many of them, some here and there. I just put one there. Lots of screenshots, only one person get it, but I'm going to put some more on there. Tom Ritchie SC on Snapchat. I may even put one on Instagram at Tom Ritchie, just like on Twitter. Actually working on that right now. And so let me give a quick shout out, ladies and gentlemen, to WowXGen and all of my friends, Morgan and Isaac, and just all of these people. Nikki is over there. They've just been supporting my work, done such a great job there, and thank you so much. I know that WowXGen, you are stressing hard, but it's going to be okay. You're going to be awesome, and all of that kind of stuff. Okay, so let me just make that clear, everybody. I love this meme here, the one that's like, Napoleon can't take Moscow if there is no Moscow. All right, so anyway, great deal. Thelma, what should I cram for tomorrow, Tommy boy? All right, well, anyway, Thelma, that's interesting nickname there. But as far as that goes, remember, the exam, the way it's set up now, not every topic's going to be assessed. From one year to the next, there will be, some topics that are on there, some that are not. You've really got to just study as much as you can. And what I typically recommend is that you get into the, what I recommend is that you study the stuff that is of most interest to you, but you also have, there's kind of a sliding scale. How much does this interest me, and how strong am I in it? So it's if you're basically like an expert on totalitarianism in Nazi Germany, then you don't need to study that. But if there's something that's I could brush up on this, and I kind of find it really interesting, then study that. That's what's going to be effective at this point. If you try to study stuff that bores you, it's just so really, I'd say find something that you find interesting that you're like, you know what, I remember my teacher was talking about in the class, I really like that, and you know, I'd like to get a little refresher on that. So that's typically what I do there, but there is no like magic pill, there's no panacea. Contrary to popular belief, they don't show the exam to Paul and me. We have no like input at all on this. Maybe Paul does, I don't. You know, they never show.
I do. I have an in. I already know the questions.
Right. He already knows the questions. All right. So, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to get ourselves in trouble. All right. So, as far as that goes, now, as far as the,
Tom, can I hop in? Can I hop in for 1 second here?
Yeah. Go right ahead, please.
I think the key thing that Tom said was the at this point in your studying. I mean, if we were doing this hangout 2 months ago, 3 months ago, 6 months ago, you know, we'd have a whole different set of study tactics, you know. The study tactic tonight is not pick up your textbook and flip to the chapter on the Renaissance and say, okay, I've got a few hours, here I go, because you're not going to make it through the Renaissance before you do a face plant into the textbook, and then you're going to be done. And so, yeah, you want to really strategically do this. You don't have a lot of time left, let's face it. And if you're watching this, I think you're watching it for one of three reasons. Either just Tom's so darn popular that you can't say no and you can't admit to your friends that you didn't watch it. Number two, you're really, really prepared for the exam, but you're so worked up about it that you feel like you have to watch this thing for 2 hours just to make sure that you know everything and you're feeling pretty good at this point. Or number three, this is like your lifeline. You really don't feel ready and you're hoping that we have all of the answers and we're going to tell you everything that's on the exam. Studying can be different for all those three things. You've got to know what you're good at. You got to know what you know and what you don't know. And then you have to figure out how you can best get information. If you know a lot, then you can try and refine that and get some more fine points, more details. If you don't know much, you want to look at big picture. You want to try and get maybe a 1-paragraph summary of each historical period and kind of just get that in your mind so you have an idea of what's going on and you can make some connections.
Yeah. Now also, Paul, I mean, I don't know about you, but I'm here for the memes. All right. So, I mean, we need another reason here. I'm here for the memes, just for the record, everyone. Please keep sending memes. All right. Which, Cass, you're asking about Metternich, my man, Metternich. Now, the Metternich rap is up. I've got a video on the Congress of Vienna. Also, if you don't want to spend that much time, the Metternich rap. There was one time, there was this guy that took a graduate level test. He was an American studying diplomacy in Austria, in Vienna, Austria. And he said that he had to take this test. And he said what was going on through his head the whole time, it wasn't my lecture on Metternich, but the Metternich rap like helped him with his graduate level test. So maybe it's got something that'll help you with your thing. I'm going to show Warm Water Records some love pretty soon. I hope, you know, it just hasn't gotten a lot of love this year, and I'm sorry about that. Now, of course, Leo, one thing that I'm going to note here about the Russian Revolution, good luck with that singing career, by the way, is that I would say that one of the things as far as what really broke Russia was World War I. You know, as far as that goes, which, you know, I actually had a guest lecturer a couple weeks ago from Clemson, you know, Dr. Steve Marks, who's, you know, got a Harvard PhD in Russian history. And, you know, he was putting forward some really interesting things that, like, you know, he was putting forward the thesis that Russia's fall wasn't necessarily inevitable, because there were a lot of things that were backward about Russia, but Russia had a stable currency. You know, there were other things there that basically, if, you know, and historians will disagree on everything, you know, you could see one of those two source things where, you know, historians disagree. Was the Russian Revolution coming anyway? But World War I was really like, as far as just something that, you know, whether it was coming anyway or whether it wasn't, you know, that this broke Russia. And so I think that that's something to keep in mind as well. Now, also, Russia was just really behind with industrialization. They were I mean, they're workers basically at a time when, if you go to Germany, for example, you're a factory worker, you've got an old age pension, health insurance, accident insurance. You go to Russia at that time, and if you work in a factory, they're still industrializing, but if you work in a factory, you don't have any of that stuff. You're basically like in about the same conditions as people who lived in Manchester, maybe even worse, and that the people in Western Europe have it better than you do. And so this is something that is, that's creating a lot of issues. So Russia is, the chickens have come home to roost, that Russia's kept this backward autocracy for all this time, and finally it's the war that breaks it. And I think that's something to note. That's something to note there. Now, Britt, I've got a great thing on the Spanish Civil War. Actually, if you put in Tom Ritchie Francisco Franco, where I actually interview a scholar, my friend Enrique, who is a professor at in New Mexico, and he was just going through some things about Franco and the historiography of the Spanish Civil War. I mean, it's about a half-hour interview, but if you got time, which maybe you do, maybe you don't. It's getting kind of close here. All right, so as far as that is concerned, all right. So what have we got? What have we got there? All right. So going into this, let's see what's next here. All right. We see Kansas City, Missouri. Okay, Alpha. I'll actually be in Kansas City for the AP reading. The first week of June. Probably do a meetup at least on the Kansas side. So be ready for that. Okay, so you need help on the King James. All right. Now, as far as that needing help on the King James, I'm going to do the Stuarts will be one of my things I'm going to save for tomorrow. Paul, do you think that's an agreeable thing, like thinking about saving something like that for tomorrow?
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I don't know if you meant to do that, Paul. No. Paul said, absolutely. All right. So as far as that goes, I don't know if that was meant to be a pun or not, but it was really funny. But yeah, I plan to do the Stuarts will be one of the things I'm going to do tomorrow. I'll do the Enlightenment and the Philosophes. So, we're going to focus on post-1815 stuff, but I have a few things that I'm holding back in order to, because I plan on doing them tomorrow at breakfast with Richie. Let's see. Abe is asking, Montesquieu, Tom, who is he? All caps shouting at me. More info on the Franco-Prussian War. Now, once again, ladies and gentlemen, Paul and I have videos. We've already mentioned it as thoroughly as we're going into it. All right. And thank you, Katie. Thank you, Katie, for the shout out. Can we go over Impressionism? Okay, I think that that is a worthy topic. Paul, anything on Impressionism?
Well, I don't do good impressions myself, but there definitely is an art form I can talk about it. Impressionism is super duper important, and I like the Impressionists not only because I really like Impressionist art, but also because it creates a shift, and I think there are two major shifts that happen in art in Europe in this course. Obviously, we have lots of different movements that happen, which are sort of variations of the shifts. Some which are very good, like the Renaissance, the Romantics, and some which are absolutely atrocious, like Rococo. But when you get to the Impressionists, like you have these two major shifts. The Renaissance movement is going to shift from a medieval view of the world, which has to do with portraying things based on sort of biblical significance, with little to no worry about perspective and reality and stuff like that. The Renaissance is going to emphasize depicting the natural world, depicting the world as it is, trying to make things look as natural as possible. And variations on that theme will continue up until the Impressionists. And the Impressionists, though, change things. And the reason, or at least one of the reasons, I can't say the reason, one of the reasons the Impressionists came about was because of technology. Two forms of technology really created Impressionism. Number one, the invention of the camera. All of a sudden, you could take pictures of things rather than having to pay someone to paint the things for you. And that was much easier. It was much more realistic, and it was much cheaper, as long as those things at the time would kind of stay still for a while, because, it took a while to develop the technology and the pictures. But the other kind of technology was oil paint that came in tubes, which made it portable. And so the Impressionists took themselves outside, and they realized that they needed to sort of change the way art worked. Impressionist art is really characterized by very broad brushstrokes. You can see the actual moves on the canvas that the painter makes. And they study light and the way light interacts with its surroundings, trying to capture like an absolute moment in time. And you have Impressionist artists who will paint the same setting over and over and over and over in different seasons, different time of day, different weather patterns, and all of this, trying to show how light sort of affects it. But if you see a painting that's like no outlines, it has lots of very broad brushstrokes, and it gives you, wait for how you're going to remember this, an impression of how the artist saw this moment in time, then you're probably seeing an Impressionist painting. And if it says Monet or Manet, then definitely it's an Impressionist painting. But so this is a shift. And from here on out, art will be now not depicting the world as it is, but the world as it's perceived by the artist, or as the artist wants the viewer to perceive it, or as a total denial of any form of art, like the Dada movement will be.
Yeah, the Dada stuff is always very, very interesting. You know, which we can show that off. Why not talk about a little Dada? Okay, so let's go ahead and get that going. All right, ladies and gentlemen, check out my app. And then we're going to go, let's see, you know, Dada. Now, one thing, and Paul, you may have hit that, but Impressionism, you know, the themes are very like, you know, mundane, everyday life, that sort of thing. The visible brushstrokes also give it away. Now, Dada is basically like it's anti-art. You know, you've got this whole disillusionment after World War I. And so you've got, you know, Dada, which just doesn't mean anything. And so, you know, basically it's just like, you know, I got a, you know, a urinal, and I turned it on its side and I wrote my name on it, and it's like, look, I made an art. And so then, you know, it's just like, that's basically Dada. And this is 1917, right in the middle of World War I, kind of on the tail end of it, I guess, technically. But as far as this goes, like, this is something, and if you think about like modern philosophy, all right, modern philosophy, which is based on, like, if you look at existentialism and some of the other, you know, philosophy movements, and especially Camus, who's kind of an existentialist, maybe in some ways, kind of his own thing, but basically the idea of the absurd. World War I represents a turning point in European history, because before World War I, there was still this like faith in the Enlightenment idea of human perfectibility, that technology and science and reason, we are building something that is eventually going to be a perfect society. So we see the advent during the Second Industrial Revolution, the advent of, you know, chemicals, the advent of the steam engine, of mass production of steel, you know, airplanes, automobiles, all of that kind of stuff. And it's like, look, we've got progress here. And then Europe goes to war, and people use all of that progress to kill each other. Over what? You know, this is the sort of thing that it's like, okay, so, you know, maybe things don't make as much sense as we thought they did. And that's where you start to see people who start to say, like, look, you know, there is no such thing as objective truth. And the whole idea of reason is just stupid. You know, Nietzsche is like kind of an early existentialist, which Nietzsche's like reacting against the Christian worldview. You know, the reasoning worldview, you know, wrote the Antichrist, basically saying, look, you know, the whole Christian worldview, it's basically, it glorifies weakness. When you look at life glorifies strength. And so, you know, we have this this philosophy here that's basically against everything that is actually is. And so really existentialism is a rejection of abstract values, and saying that first we're concerned about matters of human existence, which Jean-Paul Sartre said existence precedes essence. Okay, that basically, you know, as far as there being meaning, that there's no meaning until you give it meaning, that meaning is completely subjective. And so, you know, when you get into this whole existentialist thing, it's saying that, you know, there really is no objectivity. And really, like, now Sartre was criticized by a lot of people, and Sartre said, you know what, in his lecture, Existentialism is a Humanism, he said that existentialism is actually something that's empowering, because while some people might say, well, there's no truth, there's no objective truth, well, I should live a life of despair. And Sartre says, no, I mean, it's like you can make your own truth. You can make your own self. You can dedicate your life to whatever you want. That existentialism essentially means freedom, that now you have the freedom to live your own life as you choose. Now, it's also the freedom, like if somebody was like, oh, well, the Holocaust happened and, I helped, but, I had to. No, you didn't have to. You had the freedom to lay down your life for something that you believed in. Nobody forced you to do this. And so, it carries a lot of weight. Now, of course, John Paul Sartre's consort, for lack of a better word, was Simone de Beauvoir, who wrote The Second Sex in sometime in the late 1940s, right after World War II. Now, what Mary Wollstonecraft was to like first wave liberal feminism, basically a feminism on the basis of natural rights, and Enlightenment ideas. Simone de Beauvoir is really about, things that are like existentialist feminism, that basically, woman has been perceived up to this point as other. Okay, that woman has not really gotten her due, and so how can a woman function as an equal in a modern society? But she's got some very existentialist analysis rather than an analysis based on rights and stuff like that. So as far as that goes, let me just quick shout out to a few of my new Snapchat followers who added me: Destiny, Daniel, Adri, Ashley, Kathy, Tofu, Maddleflower, Adri. Do I have two Adris? Wow, that's like two in a row. Wow. All right, and we got that. So Tilly and Sage, thank y'all so much, Diana, for adding me on Snapchat. And I just put another promo code on there a little while ago for the Romulus Euro app. Only $2.99 at the App Store. Just nice little handy way to review, especially right before the exam. Just have it in the palm of your hand. Turn your phone into an ally. All right. So as far as that goes, let's go ahead and take a little look here and see what we've got going. My friend Luke Holloway, let's see, the history of the balance of power in Europe and the forming of coalitions. Okay, so as far as that kind of stuff, let's see. So as far as that goes, shout out to Mr. Holloway's class. And when we think about the balance of power, okay, now first of all, like the balance of power is this, constant. Which actually, you know what? You want to talk about the balance of power, Paul? Why am I keeping on rambling here?
Hey, you know what? I like listening to you sometimes. I'll tell you that it's our balance of power, really.
Yeah,
maintaining that balance. I think the idea of the balance of power really. It is a theme throughout this course. We see it very early in the Italian city-states who are looking to try and create a system where city-states can't gain too much power over other city-states. It goes very badly for them when they start calling in the big boys to kind of bail them out. But the notion of a balance of power, that you can counteract power with other power, is something that the European nations continually try to go back to. Every time one country starts to rise up, there's this almost magnetic force that pulls together other countries to counterbalance them. And when that the country that rises up and asserts itself gets defeated, and they always do, then the countries that banded together to defeat them then try and set up some system, and they keep trying to figure out how the system is going to work, in which that they can prevent this from ever happening. And this goes through lots of different phases. There are times where they try and say, this is especially true during the absolutist period. After every war, it seems like they just say, you know what, let's put everything back like it was before the war, because that was when there weren't problems. And then we'll say, go back to history, we'll just sort of turn the clock back, set all the borders back, pretend like this whole thing never happened, and go. and that doesn't work. Then there's attempts to try and sort of create coalitions that counteract power. There are moves to try and force powers to work together to fight threats to power. The Concert of Europe that comes out of the Congress of Vienna in 1815 is an attempt to not only shut down challenges to monarchical and government power, but also to create a unifying force between the members of the Concert of Europe so that they're allied against other foes than each other. And then that doesn't work. It holds for a while. Then there are attempts to try and isolate, then there's sort of like the balance of power based on groups of countries, which lead to World War I. And then, you know, the Cold War is kind of that too. A balance of power based on two competing ideologies who are armed to the teeth and can annihilate each other and wipe out the entire population of the earth many times over, thus assuring in sort of a backwards logical fashion that with the ability to so horribly devastate the earth, that having that is good because then no one will use it. And it's kind of like once you let the cat out of the bag, you know, you kind of both have to put a fence around your cats, but then you get more cats to sit there just in case the other one decides to open their fence up on you. I don't know why cats would come and attack someone, but it started as a good analogy at 9:30 at night. I guess it just didn't finish as one. Anyway, the idea of a balance of power is that there can always be someone to sort of counteract a possible threat from another. And what we see over and over and over and over again is that balances of power only maintain for short periods of time until countries' interests shift, and that throws off the balance of power, and all of a sudden there's another crisis to deal with.
All right. So, yes, I tell you what, my man JC from Chapin never disappoints. He says here, he's got a little meme here. It's like surrender. Let's see. Surrender the memes of production. Haha, get it? The memes of production, ladies and gentlemen.
I'll never get sick of jokes like that.
Yes, me. I tell you what, the memes, y'all just keep those coming. We're going to be broadcasting for at least another like 20 minutes or so. So, you know, memes, great way to study. If Fatima and Vivi are watching, you know, out in San Diego, I tell you what, Vivi studies with memes. And, you know, it's just don't judge her. All right. If you judge her, you judge me, because I'm all about me some memes. All right. So,
San Diego, Tom, if I may, I'll just give a shout out because that's where I came from, San Diego, and I started my teaching career at La Jolla High School. So if anyone out there from La Jolla High School is watching, that's where this whole thing got started. So yeah, I'm glad to hear we got some Pacific Coast viewers here.
All right, excellent. Yes, they're definitely active on the let's see, looking at memes as a form. Oh man, I tell you what, that's great. That's great, Lawrence. Or Lauren, yeah, let's see. Now, as far as that sort of thing, well, okay, there's somebody asked, hey, please talk about the 1500s and the 1600s. All right, that's not quite what we do here, ladies and gentlemen.
No, we've already done it.
Okay, but thank you, Owen. You know, it's just like, hey, could you please talk about that time from between 1450 and the present? You know, that would be very, very helpful. All right, shout out to Miss Davis's class. Miss Davis has always been so good to me and such a big supporter of my work. Shout out to Mr. Erde, Mr. Friendlund. Okay, that's one of my favorite memes, Fire Rock. All the characteristics of Rococo. McKay, you are trolling Paul Sargent. Okay, Paul Sargent hates Rococo, which I mean, Rococo is I always call Rococo extra, okay? Because when you look at Renaissance art, I mean, anyway, you know, I may talk about art a little more tomorrow, but basically asymmetrical, lots of stuff going on, just about as extra as you can get. And then, of course, neoclassicism kind of comes in and restores balance, which, you know, Paul's been really big on some of these overall trends when you think about just, you know, the things, the movements in European history and how whether it's art, whether it's government, you know, the pendulum keeps swinging and all of that kind of stuff. Yes, JC got that tweeted. All right, I got a retweet on that, my man JC. 1968 Paris protests. Now, what I'm getting on that, Paul, is basically you've got the Prague Spring in 1968, and then the student protests. I don't know. I just basically there were a bunch of protests that year. I mean, that's one of those things maybe I should look a little more into. Do you go any deeper into it than that?
I really don't. In fact, this is where I think we should probably say that this course really does focus on some very big concepts, and the College Board has been nice enough to kind of give us a really, a fairly specific idea of just exactly what it is they're looking for. So with things like 1968, they really just want you to know that this is sort of like a period, or it's an example of a trend in the second part of the 20th century, second half, I guess, whatever, that these new voices are starting to show up. And one of them is student, like the voices of the young, the youth. 1968 being a big year for youth movement protests, and that it's opening up sort of the political forum to these new voices. This would include, women having a second wave of feminism. This would include student voices. This would include later voices of the LGBT community. This would include voices of immigrant groups that are coming from other areas of the world into Europe in increasing numbers. And all of those together kind of represent more of a diversity of opinion throughout Europe, but also it creates more of a controversy, because with more differing opinions, you have more opportunities for conflict, not maybe like warlike conflict, but social conflict, and that you can carry into discussions about Brexit votes, and you can talk about sort of the recent elections in France. You can take that a lot of different ways, but they really want you to understand that in the late part of the 20th century, that there are these new groups of people who have historically really not had a say in things, that are now asserting their voices in like very open and very influential ways.
All right, so that's that. Excellent. Now, a lot of people are asking me. I think a class is kind of spamming my Twitter here. Is asking me like, what about women under communism? The lives of women under communism. I would just answer they sucked. I mean, that's basically communism's just bad. Now, here's the thing that women's suffrage is going around, and 1917. The Bolsheviks say, we're going to allow women to vote, equal suffrage for women. And it's like, but it doesn't mean anything. I mean, that's the thing. So when it comes down to it, that sort of thing. Now, so I'm getting a lot of stuff on there. Berlin blockade. Ladies and gentlemen, that's like, you can read a paragraph of Wikipedia. Y'all act like the internet doesn't exist. All right. That basically, and this is something like hey, Berlin blockade. All right, Stalin basically stops the, it's like basically there were a few there was a train route to get to West Berlin, okay? Because remember the way that these occupation zones went, okay? Let me go ahead and pull up a little map for y'all. All right, so if we want to
time for the visuals, I like it.
Berlin blockade, Berlin airlift, and all of that kind of stuff there. So let's see, we need to, let's see. All right, Jacob, let's see. All right, so as far as that goes, let's see, ladies and gentlemen. So, remember app, ladies and gentlemen. Now the visuals, let's see, Berlin blockade. All right. Okay. All right, so basically the Berlin blockade, what you've got here is the sectors of divided Berlin, okay? So essentially the Allies divided Germany and divided Berlin. Now what's funny is you're like, why is the Soviet sector bigger? Well, what happened is that, the Soviets and the British and the Americans, they get there and they're like, we want France to have a sector. And the Soviets are like, France is a joke country, okay? They lost it's coming out of your end if you want France to have a sector. And so basically that's why you see that the other sectors are smaller than the Soviet sectors, because this could have been in thirds, but then you see here, now as Paul said, they eventually go into the trizone. So that's what we've got there. Now, basically, Stalin decides he's going to shut down the rail line because Berlin is in Soviet-occupied Germany. And so he decides he's going to shut off the rail line. And what happens there is the Berlin Airlift, which goes on for several months. Okay, I think nearly a year, that basically they are supplying, just around the clock flights, to West Berlin. All right. So you basically got this Western enclave that is in the middle of this Eastern Bloc country. So I think that map really says a lot about this. And once again, you see this French sector that reminds me of an hourglass, because basically Britain's like, okay, you can have some of ours, you can have some of ours. Kind of reminds me of like, Forrest Gump, where Forrest is getting on the bus and like Jenny's like, you can sit here if you want. That's like that's France. It's just like we'll let you sit here and pretend you're somebody or whatever. And so that's basically, if you want the Berlin Airlift, Berlin Blockade, all of that kind of stuff. All right, so ladies and gentlemen, now speaking of second wave feminism, somebody asked me to talk about women. Looks like Romulus EDU just tweeted a question about women. One of the big things is, let me just go into it, like the Renaissance was sexist, all right? That basically there's not a lot of growth for women at that time. Even when you go into the Enlightenment, although women ran salons, you've got Rousseau, writing in Emile that basically a woman's job is to please her husband. A woman needs to be there for the man. Oh, okay. Miss Snyder's waiting for her shout out. Miss Snyder, I give you a perpetual shout out. Great friend over there. And I hope Miss Snyder's class does an excellent job over in Culver City, I think. Yeah, Los Angeles. Okay. So very good as far as that. Oh, yes. Our friends here. Okay. So Giovanni and Alex and JC. Yes, of course. All these guys from Chapin, Miss Snyder. And so the thing is, though, I'd say that, although women hosted salons in the Enlightenment, you still got this like really sexist mentality, and that women aren't fit for the public sphere, because remember that women are emotional and men are rational and can make political decisions and all of that kind of stuff. Messenger. I'm not advocating this, okay? I'm just telling y'all. And so the French Revolution is a turning point for the feminist movement, because Mary Wollstonecraft, okay, which she publishes, a defense of the French Revolution, like a vindication of the rights of man. And then she follows that up with a vindication for the rights of women. And so, she, and then Olympe de Gouges, I've got a series on women and the French Revolution. And so as far as that goes, I've got a series on that. So go ahead and take a look at that. Now, then you get into first wave feminism, which that's Wollstonecraft. And what they want is they want to vote. They want divorce rights, just basic, right, the right to own property. The right to collect child support and that sort of thing. Really equality under the law, political equality. And of course, that culminates in World War I with with most countries, sometime right before, during, or after World War I, like between 1914, 1930, that are giving women the vote. Now, France did not approve women's suffrage until like the 1940s or something like that. So in some places it was a little bit behind. Now, of course, France was also behind in industrialization. That's part of the reason why they lost the Franco-Prussian War so bad. And so, basically, like you've got first wave feminism, and that is political equality. Now, second wave feminism, I was mentioning Simone De Beauvoir. Okay, sorry if Paul and I if we seem a little tired, it's because we are. We've been broadcasting a lot, working hard for you. And so Simone de Beauvoir, she's bringing up a lot of these things. And second wave feminism is really much more about like economic and social equality, that while women could vote, it really didn't make that big of a difference. It's like most married women, even today, like, vote the same way as their husbands, as far as that goes. And, you never really saw like women like mobilize as a political force. And so really, though, women are looking for, after World War II, economic equality, social equality, access to the professions. When you think about medicine, law, academia, you know, these things that really were still reserved for men because they were prestigious jobs. And, you know, they want access there, and they want to have equal treatment in the workplace. They want to have access, you know, CEOs, stuff like that, you know, some protections against like sexual harassment and discrimination in employment, you know, equal pay and stuff like that. So that's how you would separate, like, you know, first wave feminism, which cultivated women's suffrage, you know, second wave feminism that that culminated in you know, basically, you know, more economic and social equality. And of course, now, you know, you got third wave feminism. You wouldn't really have to distinguish between that necessarily for this exam. Paul, any other observations about women?
No, I mean, I always like to say that you have sort of this general upsurge, this general increase in women's rights throughout the course. It's more noticeable when you get to when you start seeing changes that coincide with industrialization and moving forward into the 21st century. And so if you sort of think about it, there's a general improvement. It comes and goes at times, and it's hard to make really sort of general statements, but there's this general improvement. And if you throw down some time points where you might be able to identify changes, then like that's going to help you along. You know, the Industrial Revolution certainly gives women some opportunities, especially early on in the factories. But it also leads, you know, after some of that is limited, it leads to this sort of domestic view of women's place in the world. The women's rights movement, especially the movement for votes, really kind of becomes a reality at the end of World War I, and then kind of the women's movement goes a little bit silent for a while, and then in the 1970s kind of comes back and pushes for more equal treatment. And still, I mean, you know, it's a very arguable point that that equality still hasn't been achieved, that women are still struggling for true equality throughout the West, Europe, and the United States, and Canada, and lots of other places in the world. So you know, the story isn't done yet, I guess, but there is sort of that trend upwards, and that's sort of how I think about it.
All right. So but I think that's a good point. Kind of like we said with the Napoleonic Code, you know, not necessarily a completely forward trend. All right. So as far as that goes, let's take maybe one last question here. And again, I hope my friends at Quartz Hill are having a great time tonight. So let's see what we've got here. Jake is asking, please, Tom, what are we talking about here? All right. Must be Jake. It must be somebody who's got a protected account, because you tried to, you know what? Yeah, Sky's account is protected. So it's not that I'm ignoring Sky. Now, a lot of your tweets I just haven't seen tonight. So, I mean, I'm not ignoring people. It's just I mean, gosh, we got more than 4,000 people in here. You realize almost 5% of the people, like 4% of the people taking the exam tomorrow are here right now. Like that's, I mean, you imagine there are some groups watching. We've got like 1 in 20 people that'll be taking this exam are watching this broadcast. I mean, if that is not lit, I don't know what is. Okay.
Wow.
So as far as that goes, like just wow. Thank y'all so much for your support.
Yeah. Now, some people, Tom, I meant to bring this up earlier. Some people have sort of a misguided view of what we're doing here. There was someone, and I forget who it was, who asked if we could just give a lot of misinformation so that they could get a 5 based on a bell curve.
Oh, wow.
I don't know that we can swing the curve that much.
Yeah, that's one way to do it. Okay. And, you know, which Keynesian economics. Now, John Maynard Keynes wrote The Economic Consequences of the Peace after World War I, basically savaging the Treaty of Versailles, which was a crap treaty. Okay, I'm just going to say, yeah, I'm going to downgrade what I was going to use and just say, I mean, it was a crap treaty. All right, that it was just really, really bad. And so essentially, you know, he's saying like reparations, you know, all this stuff, it's really stupid. And then, you know, Keynes has some other theories, general theory of employment. The main thing is like during the Depression, his emphasis on deficit spending, you know, which, you know, kind of, you know, in the long run, we're all dead. Okay. And then neoliberal economics is kind of, you know, Keynesianism was in fashion through about the 1970s. And starting in the 80s, we see what's called neoliberalism, which is the return of, like, watch this. Where'd my hand go? Disappeared. It's invisible. Like, well, oh, no. All right. So neoliberalism is kind of returned the invisible hand, which if you look at Europe today, you know, where you've got the EU, this free trade zone, you know, where it's really, you see a lot of economic liberalism here in terms of trade. And if you look at this French election that happened just now with Marine Le Pen, you know, which, you know, she's saying, you know, just like Keynes said, in the long run, we're all dead. You know, free trade, 100 years from now, everybody's better off. But in the short term, it creates winners and losers. And so, you know, you're seeing with neoliberalism, I think we're seeing a bit of a revolt against, you know, some of the neoliberal policies. But neoliberal is basically kind of like, you know, a throwback Thursday, Adam Smith type thing, you know, really focusing on more, you know, laissez-faire private sector economics, which I think by and large, you know, is a good thing. And so as far as that goes, ladies and gentlemen, you know, we've got that. Now, as I mentioned before, if you're watching at tomritchie.net/hangouts, I am about to do a more like a smaller group, you know, kind of session here. And so I just want to remind y'all that that's happening. That's available on my website. It is the Salon Review. Now, all of the tickets for like the actual, like the Catherine level, the Empress level, those are all gone. Okay. So those are the people that are basically going to dictate what it is that I talk about. I'll be answering their questions, but I've created a, you know, some people like they want a small group review. I had that available for them. And so, but if you want to watch, if you just want to be there and you'll be able to participate in the chat, I'm going to have Henry monitoring that, making sure people aren't saying a bunch of mess. It's racist or whatever. I never put the chats on in my, you know, in my public sessions because people just say stuff that's not really appropriate for an academic environment. But I think my friend Henry is going to help me monitor the chat. So if you get the $5 level, you will get to join on the chat. You will get to see what's going on. You just won't have the ability to influence where it's going, but you can still talk to each other. Okay. So, so keep that in mind. Now, the thing is, I called this the night before Euro, and, you know, there are some teachers, there are such great teachers out there. You know, Miss Salinas, actually, I think Miss Salinas might have asked me to do something for her, and she's so good to me. So good to me. Let's see. Yes. Okay. So, okay. So yes. Okay. So. Okay, so the thing is, those of you who bought at the Catherine level, I'm going to be updating the link in just a second, so y'all be able to video chat and whatever. All right, so ladies and gentlemen, as far as that is concerned, so that's going on in a few minutes. You're welcome to join me for that or not. But let me shout out to all of these great Euro teachers, just so many people that have been just excellent. It's such a great community because I had this idea. I was like, what if we did a night before Christmas story, but called it the night before Euro? And, you know, I was like, gosh. And so I sat down at my computer and I started just typing, and I put together a little like stanza or two. And then I was like, wait, there's so much I've got going on this week. It's really a dumb idea for me to try to do. I mean, it's going to be at the expense of something else. So I was just like, I put something in the Facebook group and I asked the Euro teachers, like, could you please give me a little help here? You know, if you can contribute like just a few couplets or something. And the AP Euro teacher
how quickly.
Yeah. And the thing is, like, the AP Euro teacher community just really came through for me. And I really just, I mean, it's really like, it's, you know, some people say humbling, you know, I'm honored. Okay. I mean, the thing is, that, you know, there are all these teachers that support what I do. When I started doing this, and Paul's probably thinking the same thing, you know, we're doing this mainly thinking students might need some help, you know, and then it's like, you know, teachers come in here and support us. And it's just like, just wow. So all of you AP Euro teachers that are out there supporting what we do, thank you so much. And this ladies and gentlemen, is for you. So it's story time. Okay, so we've got the night before Euro, and so I'm going to read y'all a little story. Now, some of this stuff I haven't even like really looked at, and so it's kind of like a rough draft. Okay, so you know, I might clean it up at some point, but let me go ahead and get started. This is called The Night Before Euro. 'Twas the night before Euro, when all through the nation the students shared memes about defenestration. The heads were cut off by the guillotine with care. If speak against Robespierre, anyone dared. The great Tsar was nestled, all snug in his bed, with visions of warm water ports in his head. And Marie in her wig, and Louis with his locks. The people were hungry. They learned with a shock. And out at Versailles, there was little was the matter, until women arrived and the silence was shattered. Away they were taken, away in a carriage. Things would not end well for this political marriage. Advances in science cast a dubious glow on the church, which for so long had just run the show. When what to Henry VIII's eyes did appear, but a series of wives who all disappeared. The birth of a son made King Henry so proud, but it turned out his daughters stood out from the crowd. Now quicker than eagles the emperors came to take over Poland again and again. Now Catherine, now Joseph, now Frederick the Great. Enlighten the folks in your absolute states. To the top of the gate, to the top of the wall. Don't worry. In 89, both of them fall. As Europe industrialized, things seemed to advance. New technologies might give the working classes a chance. Cecil Rhodes took from Africa diamonds and gold, with a personal life that was subtle and bold, with a scholarship fund to advance the empire, and African railroads and telegraph wires. As imperialism spread to Africa, nations scrambled around, but along came Bismarck to Berlin to calm them all down. They would divide the continent from its head to its foot, to civilize, preach, and get materials for industrial output. For taking up the white man's burden, they gave themselves praise, using social Darwinism to justify this new imperialist phase. His eyes, how they glared, his dimples so scary. But the worst thing on Stalin, his mustache so hairy. Peter's people were modern. They were almost the best. And the beards on the chins were as short as the West. The ideas of Catholics Mary held tight in her teeth. Protestant blood, it encircled her feet like a reef. Wow, that was graphic. Right? He had a great plan to defeat dual foes, but von Schlieffen's idea turned into great blows. Stalemate and shell shock to blame and reparations. The war to end all wars, the idea is an abomination. Nations would rise, attempt to restore former glory, but the result would be misery beyond a horror story. With exhausted brains and with riders' cramp, the foreheads of youths were all wrinkled and damp. Weeks you have spent in dedicated review to the content, skills, and essays be true. If you find yourself stuck and overwhelmed too, simply ask yourself, what would Otto von Bismarck do? But I say to you all, as we end our time live, happy testing to all, and may all get a 5. All right, so ladies and gentlemen, thank y'all very much for participating in this broadcast. I will be back, at 10 o'clock for the small group broadcast. Anybody wants to subscribe to that. Now, remember, Breakfast with Richie, 9 o'clock in the morning, same place, tomrich.net/hangouts or YouTube, 9 o'clock Eastern. Now, those of you on the West Coast, I haven't forgotten about you. You know, Fatima and all your bunch, I'm going to be broadcasting for a while. Don't wake up don't wake up at 6 o'clock in San Diego. You'll be able to access the broadcast later. And I plan to be broadcasting, hopefully till, at least like 10 o'clock a.m. on the Pacific Coast. And you can always look at the archive later. So no worries about that. Okay. So just make sure about that. And you're welcome, JC. I tell you what, my friend JC. All right. So as far as that goes, ladies and gentlemen, 9 o'clock tomorrow morning, I'll be up late with some of you tonight, but everybody be here tomorrow morning for the 4th annual Breakfast with Richie. And we'll see if Paul's got to teach tomorrow. And so we'll see if at least Paul can drop by or something like that. So Paul, thank you very much. Any last minute advice for the young folks?
No, hey, look, there's a lot of questions which have been posted here, and a lot of questions that we just don't have the time to get to, and especially that we don't have really the time to give the attention to that they deserve. But please don't forget, as we sign off tonight, boy, I'm starting to sound like that poem, that we all have these videos, and watch them you might. I don't know. But
nice.
We've got these videos which cover so many of these topics which are on our YouTube channel. So check them out if you need help on specific topics. They're there. Watch them as many times as you want to. They're free, so make use of them. And if we all have multiple hangouts from multiple years that are posted. There's a lot of resources there. Most of all, get some sleep, because you'd want to be well rested when you take this exam tomorrow, because tomorrow it's time for you to make history.
Nice. Well, thank you, Paul, for stopping by. And ladies and gentlemen, remember, the app is the Romulus app is there. You don't have to get it, but certainly I'd appreciate it. It's got some stuff in there I think will help you out, but just something there for you. And thank y'all so much, ladies and gentlemen, for supporting what we do here. And I'm looking forward to one last review with all of you tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. Eastern. And in about 5-10 minutes, I will have the premium salon review ready for those of you who subscribe to that. It is always a pleasure. AP Euro.